Hey, I'm just quickly jumping in here before we get into today's conversation. If you're enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Click that little bell button to get notified when the new episodes come out. And if you'd like to support Paramount Importance even further, please check out our website, paramountimportance.com. We've got some awesome merch there. They've got these cool shirts, these cool hats, all environmentally friendly and the highest quality we could go. It generally helps us keep on doing what we are doing, spreading the word of science, inspiring a whole bunch more people. It really helps us out. But without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Let's go. Paramount Importance. What is environmental planning?
Oh, good question. I'm kind of defining environmental planning as everything that urban planning is not doing. So urban planning is really good at working out where roads go and working out where new housing developments might go and kind of looking at the form of a city, but it's not very good at looking at the environment and hasn't been very good at this, especially in places like Perth, where we're living and talking today. It hasn't been very good at it at all. And over many years, the environment's sort of been eroded at the expense of a city.
Right. So because we're like one of the largest cities in footprints, low population, but one of the largest. That's what you were meaning by like...
Yeah. If you go on a Sunday when there's no pick-out traffic, you drive from the southern tip of Perth to the northern tip of Perth, and you're in the car for like 2.5 hours. And that's the Perth Peel metropolitan area. It's 150 plus kilometres. It's really an enormous city for its population of, where are we at, 2.3 million?
What could we have done better when you mean like it's done poorly?
Yeah, so you could talk about many dimensions here, but I think if you go to great cities internationally that are in harmony with their environment.
What's an example? What would be one that is in harmony?
So, for example, I think a city like Sydney has been more in harmony with its environment, but it's still, it still has its own issues around urban planning for sure, but Sydney was always very hard to build upon. Like there's all these little bays and all these high points and topographies and sandstone cliff faces. So it's kind of it's been harder to develop it itself, and it's had to work with nature more, I think.
Right. So its hand was forced.
Yeah, hand was forced. Whereas Perth's just a sandy plain. It's very easy to go to the wetlands and fill in the wetlands. It was very easy to go to the Banksia woodlands and sort of build upon these. But it was never also something about Perth. It was like, this is a settler mentality, a kind of colonial mentality. Sydney was like very much revered. They were like, it's the most beautiful place in the world. We've never seen anywhere beautiful. This is what, the colonizers were saying as they went into Sydney. But for Perth, it's like, it's not this way. There was always this like mentality that it's sort of a scratchy, difficult place to live. It's maybe even an ugly place, which is it sort of stays with the population in some way. I mean, I'm not sure how you think about this, but you're often talking to people and they'll just be like, yeah, Perth's just like a desert or something. It's like, it's not. It's actually like a woodland and a jarrah forest and an incredible coastline. It's an amazing, amazing place.
Yeah, the coastline is pretty incredible. So when you describe your work as like sitting in between environmental science and design, how do you see landscape and architecture contributing to environmental understanding in ways that traditional science might not?
Yeah. I was thinking about this the other day. We've got to be mindful of our disciplines, right? And the word discipline itself is like, discipline's like a punishment. Don't stray outside your discipline. But I love going between disciplines because I think there's so much to learn as you encounter the sciences, as you encounter the design, as you work in the spaces that are more connected to the arts. I mean, everyone tends to think, if you stay in that discipline, you tend to look at problems and just think, the solution is my discipline. The solution may be what my discipline can bring. But I think it's actually like, it's all of these spaces working together. It's all of these disciplines working together that we really need to be focusing on this now, this interdisciplinarity or this cross-discipline mindset. I mean, design to me, working in the space of the environment, design offers a lot. A design training, it's often thinking about the future. It's like thinking about how we can do things better, how we can design with nature in a more productive, positive, beneficial way. But then it's also, I think, often visual, and this is like a bias of the discipline as well. It's like we'll be around a table and science might be thinking more about the data of it. I'm not thinking so much about the data. I'll be thinking about the picture or the way this gets communicated, particularly visually. So the map, the spatial side of it. So to have these biases is really great. To be the kind of spatial biased guy is really great. But then you've got to know that you're working within this whole other field and framework of different people thinking in different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does it start when you start looking at those projects, when you're planning an area? What like how far are you thinking into the future of, like, let's say, like, oh, is this going to be a one-way road or two-way road? And then, like, I guess you also have to balance, as you said, different disciplines of like aesthetics with the environment, with the buildings, and then in environments, and then you got the ecological minded people of like, oh, we need to have nature corridors or things like
Totally.
How does all this get put together?
Yeah, I mean, to use an example at the moment, the simple answer to that question is planning policy, which is kind of like a very black and white instrument, is what is driving so much of this stuff. I mean, you look at our new subdivisions in Perth, there's not much design going on there at all. They're being rolled out according to the specifications of developers to get as many houses as possible out there on those lots. And they're in accordance with neighbourhood design guidelines that state governments have established over many decades. So it's like super black and white stuff. There's not a lot of space for creativity, for innovation, but that whole thing needs to change. But where it's getting really interesting is around our central suburbs. Like, a really great example of a project recently has been the Coburn Community Wildlife Corridor. And after the whole Row 8, Row 9, which was just terribly sad, 2016, 2017, having jarrah trees and Bankshire woodland being demolished. And really, I think 35,000 protesters or something here at the Belia wetlands, just to say this is not good enough. We can't stand for this. We don't want roads to be ploughing through wetland chains. And then you have this whole, then there's a change of government, and McGowan gets elected largely based on the promise that that's all ending, and it did end. But the community had this fantastic idea for the wildlife corridor, for this interconnected, to use all that road reservation as an interconnected corridor from the wetlands to the coast, and put this idea forward to government. And only last year, part of that corridor was rezoned to urban. So you're coming along the corridor and bits of it have been added to the regional park, but then you get to this big urban zone. And working with the community groups, we at UWA School of Design put together a scheme that would bring in housing. We could have a little bit of housing along that corridor, actually a lot of housing. You could get many hundreds of dwellings in that section, but you'd need like 40% open space to keep the corridor going. And in that 40% open space, you could have parklands, and you could have little ovals, and you could have a bushland restoration, and you could kind of strengthen the existing tree canopy that's going through that corridor. But you could also have housing as well. So a lot of my work is trying to find these situations where you might just get an outcome which is just blanket housing and maybe 10% open space, which is the legislative requirement. It's way too low. To do nature in cities well, we need to be thinking kind of that bigger picture, the strategic scale. We need to think, how can we link this bit of land with that bit of land and create a beautiful wildlife corridor? And it can't just be 2 meters wide or, 10 meters wide. It has to be like 60, 80, maybe 100 meters wide.
But like, in terms for people listening, the importance of having connected corridors is like when you start getting fragmentation, there's all these species, whether it's like marsupials or little mammals or larger mammals like kangaroos, their ranges are massive, and they need to be able to be connected, one to either breeding or just like their ranges, or I think, what's the numbat? The numbat's got a range of like, one male is like, I'm going to say 150 hectares or something a lot larger.
Amazing.
Maybe even like, that's only one. So if they've like got a really fragmented area, they're not breeding, then just the movement of genetic diversity, so you don't bottleneck the genetics of a population of species, and then something comes in, wipes them out, and you start losing your whole diversity. So like having that connectedness is hugely important in terms of just like an animal perspective, and I guess plants as well.
Absolutely.
I learned some very interesting things over the years talking to plant biologists, that the importance of like having animals dispersing seeds of plants, because if they have that fragmentation, even those plants' genetic diversity all bottlenecks, and then something comes in and wipes that plant out, and then you start losing ecosystem functions and things.
Yeah.
So like, as you said, people from different disciplines coming into like these planning things can be hugely important to like understand why you need to have those connected areas and all that. So
and the scientists will be saying the same thing, as you say. The science is saying the same thing as the designers who are looking at nature and people, and it's great for people. It's great for cycling. It's great for walking. It's great for all kinds of reasons that corridors are important in cities. It's like a human body. It's like, our hand's important and our head's important, but and we might not think about our arm as often as the hand or the head, but it's like absolutely super critical because it holds our hand to our body, right?
Yeah.
It's like all these bits of, we can't sever these things. We can't cut them off, or we lose that living system.
There's something that I've been like pondering on for a little bit. So it all sort of started when I came back from Bangkok. That was probably the worst I've ever felt of coming from a place, because it was this massive city. Even when I was in the plane, like I couldn't see where the city ended, and could hardly see any green. It was just one massive concrete jungle. The only green I saw, I was like, oh look, there is a park there, but it was a golf course, and I was like, oh, that's how golf courses are run. Totally. Sometimes not usually in unison with nature, and I kind of thought, okay, it's like humans can live without nature in a way. Well, like we can farm, agriculture, got all different ways to be able to sustain food and all that, but that aesthetic value, like especially for like mental health, like all those values that nature also provides, like you can't put a number or value on that. And so to be able to have that planning, I guess, to like still have, be able to live harmoniously or in unison with nature's like so important.
It's so important. And I really worry about this in parts of the world, which includes our own city, sadly, where so much of the housing is devoid of nature. There's no nature around. That you go to the edges of Perth, and this is kind of what makes Perth what makes the whole southwest a kind of biodiversity hotspot. It's this immense biodiversity that's in this region, but it's under threat from human impacts, right? And one of those major impacts is urbanization. You go to the edges of the city and you see a new urban development emerge, and it's the clearing of the Banksia woodland, the clearing of the land. They bring in a lot of sandy fill because often the water tables are pretty high in those areas of the city we're developing in now. In comes the sand, and then the developments that occur there's often then just astroturf in the front yards, and the design codes, call them design codes, they're not really designed at all, because you can't actually fit a tree between someone's front door over here and another person's front door over there. Once you've put in the services and the water and the power and the roads, there's actually no space to plant an effective tree with a good canopy. So all these amazing suburbs in Nedlands, Dalkeith, constructed hundreds of years ago, they've got wonderful tree canopy, and they're incredibly leafy and they're incredibly shady. And as Perth gets hotter, they're going to be, way cooler places.
Yeah, that's actually I was going to bring up next. Is like going in a lot of these new suburbs, they were like 10 to 15 degrees hotter than what like the air temperature is around. And so I remember there was a day that was like, I think it was 40 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. But everyone can do the conversion. It's very, very hot day.
Very hot day.
The suburb, I can't remember which suburb it was, but it was like 52 or 53 degrees in the suburb. And on a 40-degree day, it's just because of the heat radiating from the amount of concrete and tin roofs. And
absolutely,
like there was just no trees or nature to like cool it down. And I was like, would not want to be living there.
Yeah.
Like that is so hot.
It's so hot. And it does worry me that in these parts of Perth where also if you look at the social disadvantage and the fact that you need to drive a really long way to get to work in a lot of these outer suburban areas, the kind of inequities emerging. To me, it's the reason it's a question of planning and policy is because it's creating inequity. It's creating more inequity. It's creating an inequity of climate. It's creating an inequity of access to nature. And they just get worse as everything gets hotter and everything gets drier, which in Perth it certainly is. These issues become compounded and they get worse. But I'm really hopeful about certain things like 10 years ago, 15 years ago when I was starting out in this kind of field, you would talk about the urban forest and people would look at you like, what's an urban forest? Like,
What is an urban forest?
Is that a little forest in the city? And it's like, now you're talking about the urban forest. It's the tree canopy. It's all the connected tree canopy of a city. And together it makes up an urban forest. And it is a forest. Right. And in some suburbs, it's 30% canopy coverage, 35% canopy coverage. And in those outer suburbs, like the ones you were just mentioning, where it's 50 degrees or whatever, it's possibly down to 2% canopy coverage. So
they just don't have those trees.
Yeah,
out the front lawns.
Well, they're not in their front yards. They're not on the verges. They're not street trees, and they're also not in their backyards because the backyards are too small. So in terms of design challenges, and this is a huge cultural challenge for Perth as well. It's just changing. It's changing what the market is offering, and it's changing what people are desiring. This idea that nature's something out there that you escape to. And then in the city, there is no nature. It has to leave us because the city can be filled with nature and estuaries and coastlines and woodlands.
When talk about estuaries, 9 of the biggest cities are built on estuaries. Most towns,
totally.
I think it's like 9. Well, I'm going to maybe butcher the stat, but it's like 90% of Australia's population live within 10 kilometres of the coastline or something.
It's astonishing.
Yeah.
And that's for a reason.
Yeah.
It's because of the natural environment.
Yeah.
So why would we come to those incredible places and not live in harmony with it? It has to change. I just feel like it has to change.
Definitely. Yeah. So how does that change start happening? You said it's policies, is it? Like how when you're environmental planning, what like is there an order of priorities?
Yeah. I mean, I'm often finding myself with the Department of Planning in these kinds of workshops where there's developers around the table and there's other people around the table and, different people from different policy areas. You'll have main roads at the table and all the authorities from water to electricity. And it's really hard to get those kinds of tables to agree, especially because I'm coming then from an academic perspective. So I'm a lecturer at UWA. And I think of all the perspectives, mine is probably the one that's like, well, surely we can do it better. Surely we can do it better. Look over here in Toronto, look at their new policy. And they're kind of like, I don't know how often, the Department of Planning in Perth are thinking about Toronto, but if they just looked to other places for a bit of inspiration, they might find whole new policies that would unlock change. But I think it's in the people. I think there's strong feeling at the moment, at least in our population, that people are starting to care more about the urban trees. People are starting to care more about the rivers and estuaries, or understand that this is like if I don't look after them, they won't look after me, kind of. Sort of reciprocity.
Yeah, well, this is getting into a bit of the topic when I spoke to Tao about media communication. We spoke about like people when they vote. Politicians are in it. It's like they sort of vote for only what suits them. Yeah, in a way. Usually, it's a monetary value. Like as you said, like people, care about the environment. I mean, there's a huge push for the amount of care, but actually, like wanting to make a difference and like to actually doing something. There's a lot less people actually going that extra step to actually wanting to make a difference because it's like. Especially, and then we've got all the other pressures. This is more just, I guess, in WA, like the housing crisis and the cost of living. Like, it's very hard to, like, we all got to survive and live, and we all want to live somewhere, kind of thing. So then it's like the cheaper the houses are, like, are the ones that have got, less space, less desired areas to live. Where, like, it's almost impossible for someone young like us to get a house that's in a nice spot.
Totally. This all plays into it. Because there's a biodiversity crisis, and there's a climate crisis, and there's a housing crisis.
Yeah.
There's all these crises. But I just think with a few shifts, one of the secrets if our houses were a bit smaller. Everyone's got this like luxury mentality, especially in Perth. I can't remember the exact average house size, but per person, we occupy some of the largest amount of space in the world. If we could just live with, the 2 bedrooms or the 3 bedrooms, or the kids could have a bunk bed, or, instead of a whole separate room, or you could forego the games room, you could have a backyard.
Yeah, yeah.
You could have a little bit more space out the front. So if our houses got a bit smaller, and if we got a little bit denser, not to the point of it being a bad place, but, who's to say that a big sprawling 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom, games room house is it a good place to live? If you look at what we know about amenity, access to natural ventilation, no, not usually. Very dependent on air conditioning. Access to a good external space, not usually. Very, very rarely. Access to natural light, also not usually. I mean, the way a house is oriented is completely dependent upon, that kind of mat of planning, and just put the house anyway. Your living spaces don't face north, like we know good houses should. So there's all kinds of ways that we could get a lot better at that. And it comes down to, of course, power. You go to Canberra and there's plenty of lobbyists for the big powerful industries. You go to Parliament House in Perth and there's plenty of lobbyists for the development industries. It's a lot of money. It's a big employer. You look around for the lobbyists for the environment, and you might not find one. They'll be holding the placards.
Yeah.
Maybe. But they're not there in the seats of power.
No.
So we've got to, if we're caring for the environment and we're trying to push environmental objectives, and we've got to bring people on board. That will be the source of power, I think.
Definitely, 100%. Punters politics talks
totally.
a lot about makes so much sense, but we're so far from anything.
But
like
we saw
that.
a few great examples. Like a few years ago, native forest logging had been happening. 7,500 hectares of southwest forest being logged every year. 80-something% of that going to firewood and pulp for paper. It's a terrible situation of native forests being logged for generations. And I love a Jarrah table as much as the next guy, but to put it all into firewood and pulp and all this stuff. So 17,000 postcards come through Mark McGowan's letterbox, and a whole bunch of signatures online. And it's like, if you can get this critical mass, you get a policy change. And native forest logging ends in West Australia. It's the first state in Australia to do so. Other states have now followed suit, including Victoria, New South Wales, Tasmania, not yet. But it's like you can get policy change with enough numbers.
Right.
It's really hopeful. Things.
Yeah, well, that's usually a thing that we don't see too often. There's a lot of there's that standard line of people write, especially in the environmental space. It's like, this paper helps inform managers in better decisions. It's like, but there's never really that solution where you're just actually showing that there is a solution, which is a bit more of a hopeful mindset, bit
you have to
optimistic.
You have to have hope.
100%. But it's usually that, everyone's quite aware of these crises, but there's never really a solution or things like, how can we do something? Like, what can we do? Yeah. So if there's solutions to that, then there's hope.
I mean, it's that sense of agency, right? It's that sense that if we speak up, if we get together, if we can do something. That's a powerful thing for people, I think, to have. But absolutely, at the moment, there's cost of living pressures, there's a housing crisis, everyone's preoccupied with their lives in such a way that often the environment falls down. And going back to science, well, I think science has so much to offer. Science and science communication, and the way we make the stuff that we know about really apparent to the public and really important to the public. That's why, I mean, even the name of your podcast, Paramount Importance, it just suggests this need for raising the profile of these questions.
Mm.
Yeah.
I don't think it was in my mind when I came up with the name, but
Oh,
it seemed
good.
to have
Yeah.
have worked into that space. It was just by luck.
Yeah,
Like,
just don't change the logo. It's a really good logo.
Thank you. Well, actually, there's just meaning behind the logo.
Oh, cool.
So the logo is of Bald Head in Albany.
Oh, I love Bald Head.
It's amazing, amazing place. My mate created it for me, and then a year after he made the logo, I did my honours project in the estuaries of Albany. So like, without knowing that I was ever going to be working down there, it just happened to be like that connection of
Love it.
of that, and then it just sort of
it was Bald Head. I like it more now.
Yeah,
I grew up in Albany, so I'm a bit biased towards Albany, Denmark, that part of the coast.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible down there. I'm going to jump into, you've written about like the deep waters of Perth. What does that project reveal about how cities are connected to hidden water systems?
Oh yeah, this is an interesting one because we were working as part of the Cooperative Research Centre for Water Sensitive Cities, so the CRC, which is a big national project set up. And we were in a team looking at like ways of designing, planning with water in Perth a bit better. And we were connected with other places, Brisbane and Melbourne and Sydney and Adelaide, and realised, Perth is really unique, certainly in an Australian context, perhaps in an international context, because we've got these phenomenal aquifers beneath the city. And, they come through the ground as these mountains of water and form many of the wetlands. They flow into many of the estuaries. They're just like, I think the deepest aquifer, the Yarragaddy aquifer beneath Perth, has like 2,000 Sydney harbours of water.
Whoa.
It's astonishing.
Yeah.
The way we live on this water system is astonishing. And so talking about Perth and, trying to change the mentalities of things happening in Perth, I think this is just one of those sources of wonder, It's like, wow, you can't see this stuff. And a lot of this communication is about bringing stuff that we depend upon, but we can't see, to the surface and saying, look how cool this is. 2,000 Sydney harbours of water down there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So we use that in a lot of our drinking water.
Yeah.
I know that's like we've depleted the water table.
It's about 50-50 now, 50% desalination.
Yeah, we've changed a lot, which is, when I heard that number, I was quite impressed.
Yeah.
I know we've still got like a water crisis and shortage, another issue of like, we use a lot of dams for a lot of things, and even we had like a super wet winter. I don't think we even breached half the capacity of the dam, which is pretty astonishing.
It's that thing about the tipping points and the tipping points in the ecosystem as it changes. It's like, the rainfall since the 1970s has gone down like 15% or something around this. But the stream flows have gone down like 80%.
Yes.
So you get to that tipping point. And the thing about planning and designing and the way that this civilization just rolls on is you never know when those tipping points are going to come up. Like when's another? You probably see this with the fish, right?
Yeah, or estuaries in general, the tipping point. So that's something actually we work quite a lot in now.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned about the reduction of flow is probably definitely in the top 3 most important things of an estuary, if not the most important thing. And even though, let's say, there's an estuary that's permanently open to the ocean, like the Swan River, when you have big flow, it flushes, the obvious one, it flushes a lot of the nutrients and things out. It scours the ground. But what you start seeing, and this is probably going to appeal a lot more to, let's say, the wreck fishes for the moment, that when you've got that high flow, it scours the sea floor or the estuary floor. So then you get a healthier benthic environment. That when you get a healthier benthic environment, you're getting all these different invertebrates coming in, and then your higher order predators, like most fish eat invertebrates, apart from the herbivores and maybe the tridivores, I guess, in a way. But most of these fish, they all eat invertebrates. So then when you start getting, higher populations of these fish that eat these fish, then you get higher order fish. So then in terms of, let's say, for what wreck fishers will be targeting in Perth would be like your flatheads, your mulloway, and we started seeing like multiple years after the high rainfall and high flows, like the best numbers we've seen.
Wow.
of these like species inside the Swan River.
Yeah, right.
And that's because of like the amount of flow that it came through and like improved the environment that was in there.
Amazing.
But it also has to be at the right time of year, because if you get flow in say summer, then you get hypoxic. You get stratification, hypoxic events, or the scaly mackerel, all the fish that died in the Swan. Very low numbers, but that was just because of they're a marine fish and they couldn't survive the lower salinity.
Right.
But yeah, so it's right time of year, which is obviously our standard climate, which is the rain in winter.
Yeah, wet winters.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but it's like these kinds of tipping points to me, they're terrifying because you never know when they might occur. You know, like you can't really predict them.
We're hoping to be able to get better at that.
Are you getting better at that? Okay,
but this is just more. This is more looking at specific variables. Let's say like salinity.
Yeah, right.
Like we've been working in that space for a lot.
On the topic of groundwater and aquifers, for example, I was involved with the Belia group, who's actually a group of scientists and professors formed around the whole Row 8 fiasco that I mentioned before in terms of the highway going through the wetland. Wonderful scientists, wonderful professors, but they've also been campaigning for this Yulebrook Regional Park. And there's this corridor in the eastern part of Perth that it's like 50% of Perth's biodiversity, which is massive in about 1% of the area. And there's a huge concern through there about groundwater. A lot of these ecosystems in the corridor are groundwater-dependent ecosystems. And because a lot of the adjacent land's being rezoned to industrial, there's a proposal to rezone it to industrial, and it looks like that's going to happen. All that pervious, currently agricultural pervious land up on the hydrological gradient above the Brixton Street wetlands is changing land use. And there's huge concern about what this means for the groundwater and all those groundwater-dependent ecosystems. But who knows where the tipping points are? How could they predict? How could science ever predict that without like? And you'd have to study it and try, and then try again, and then try again. It's like that's why our environmental systems are also founded on this like wonderful, important thing of the precautionary principle. Like if you don't know, you don't just do it and see what happens. You kind of like take as many precautions as you can in developing and in approving a change like this, because you just don't know how it's going to turn out.
No.
You don't know where that tipping point is yet.
So when you come to this planning, how we actually, it's going back to the question I asked earlier about the priorities. So because you talked about, you had all these different, I wouldn't say they're policymakers, but people with like different stakeholders in the room. And I can imagine some of them are the bad guys in a way that just want industrial urbanization, and then they don't have quite those ecological minded people. I probably shouldn't use the word bad guys, but it kind of feels like that. How does these like the planning happen? Like what do you like? Okay, well, like does it kind of get all connected together?
Yeah, I mean, this is why I think it's really important to. It's really tricky because everyone's got their own views, and something that the modern world's done to all of us is silo us. Everyone's more specialized than ever before, and it's like we need these cut throughs of first principles. You know, what's the big picture here? What are we all trying to achieve? What do we all want? What are the non-negotiables? And often they're very hard to find, and they're harder and harder to find, it seems, in planning contexts in particular, which makes me sad. But some positive stories about this, because you've got to keep the optimism alive. For example, if you talk about coastal risk, recently the communities up around Joondalup and up through Hillary's, etc., opposed this construction. I think it was 17 groins that were all being built up the coast for protection against sea level rise, because all the data says that the extreme weather events are getting greater and more frequent, the sea levels going up, and so the coastal erosion is just a huge issue. But I mean, it opens the space. If you take a purely kind of engineering mentality, a groin works really well, but it just kind of passes the problem down. You build a big groin, and you get build-up of sand on the northern side. You get a big wash away on the southern side, so you build another groin to the south, and then you've got 19 of them. But I mean, we look all over the world and we see, particularly places like the Netherlands, where majority of that country is below sea level. They've got these fantastic like nature-based solutions for sea level rise and risk mitigation, where they're constructing massive amounts of sand nourishment and whole new ecological systems just offshore that are now teeming with bird life and migratory birds. And they're doing the job of this. They're protecting the assets or the human side back on shore, but they're also just giving so much back to nature. So I think that would, I mean, to me, that would tick the engineer's box, which is to fix the problem. And, you know, the engineer could do some modeling around the sand and the replenishment and where it needs to go and how that's going to work over time. The ecologist could come in and understand how that needs to be designed from the point of view of the species and the habitats. The planners would be happy because they're going to protect the stuff back on land. So yeah, there's definitely solutions, but what's so tricky is we've got to be able to point to them and say, this is an option and it will work. And you can sign away on this because you can trust that it'll work. So going back to pointing to other places, I mean, we can point to literally hundreds of groins through the southwest that work in terms of 1 or 2 metrics. But we need to be able to like try these new things so we can have new options and nature positive options as well. So then everyone can come around those tables and like sign off on more innovative things and things that are better for the future.
Right.
And if the community is saying, we don't want groins, I think that's great that they've done that. They've come back and they've said, like, we just can't have this up and down the coastline. That's going to force the planners and the authorities and the engineers to come up with new solutions, which is also great.
Yeah, especially we can start taking some inspiration of where it's worked elsewhere in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting. What about like through your collaborations with like Noongar elders like Dr. Noel Nannup, how can Indigenous knowledge reshape how we plan and care for country?
Well, Noel's wonderful. If you ever get a chance to see Noel speak, he'll bring you along a journey he'll take you into deep time and take you out onto country. We're so privileged to hear from elders like Noel Nannup and be able to work with elders like Noel Nannup in the city, and so many other Noongar people in Perth and through the whole southwest, because the perspectives come out of tens of thousands of years, 60,000 years of harmony with the landscape and knowledge of that landscape. And you can't really go a sentence talking to Noel about him bringing people into it. He's never just talking about the nature, like it's over there separate from us or him. It's always about how he's engaging with it. So he's caring for it, or he's looking at it, or he's, finding food in it, or he's walking through it. I just find this is an amazing perspective, which is this, not just a Noongar perspective. I think it's pretty much in common with all First Nations groups across Australia, is this connection, the reciprocity with the land and people. And in lots of ways, the kind of Western way, the colonial way, has been to make that distance a bit further, distance people and nature a bit. And I hope that changes. I hope we all get closer to nature, because we're all fundamentally, we are nature in a really deep way. We are actually nature.
Well, we are animals.
Yeah, we're animals.
We're all part.
Totally.
Yeah. You're hitting home and reciting the same things we spoke about on yesterday's podcast with Ursula Rodriguez.
Oh, Ursula's amazing. I know Ursula.
Yeah, there we go.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so and we spoke all about that. And she mentioned Noel Nannup as well.
Noel, and she's worked with a number of other elders down there in Menang country on the south coast. And it's so important in our work. But yeah, it's also, you go back to planning and you look at these zones of industrial zone and road reserve and public open space and urban area. And I look at those drawings, I can't help but go back to the colonial times and the drawing. They're arriving in this land and just the complete creation of boundaries over these. The drawings of the river that just get divided up. That's mine. That's yours. It's we get into big topics there of just like how coloniality has affected the land, and
we've destroyed it.
Destroyed it. Yeah.
I'd
And
love to go on a time machine back
Yeah,
and just
yeah,
see what
yeah,
it looked like without the influence of
yeah,
what we've done to it.
yeah. And it's
Mm.
still very people getting really defensive about this, and it's. I'm saying this because a number of years ago, with the WA Forest Alliance and a few of the conservation groups in the forests, I put together this map of woodlands and forests pre-colonisation. I just used J.S. Beard's mapping and took out all the other ecotypes and left the woodlands and forests. And then I cut that against the remnant vegetation data set to show essentially a before and after of forests and woodlands in the southwest. And this, at the time, this went up on their social media. It was around 2019, 2020. And the commentary was really, it was quite polarizing. Like there's a lot of people in our place and in our city that still want to defend and still feel that, the sense of guilt for maybe their ancestors or their grandparents even, or their great-grandparents who might have farmed this place. There's not an acknowledgement. There's not yet an acknowledgement, but we're getting there. We're getting closer. And I say this because last week the Moora Catchment Group put up this map of the pre and post, and it's attracted like thousands of comments, and some of them are quite aggressive. So there's how we truth tell, the cultural and of course the ecological. It's a big communication question as well, and how we don't just keep polarizing as a community.
It's a big question.
It's a very big question.
Don't know the answer.
We don't need to delve down. We don't need to delve down that pathway. But
so when you've come across, like, when you're planning, is there much involvement with cultural Indigenous elders when you're planning an area? Is that now like quite involved?
Well, I wouldn't say yet there is. When places are when there are designs, like projects I've worked on all around Perth, there's certainly at the smaller scale, whether it's a university project or maybe it's a new walkway in the national park, there's definitely engagement with Aboriginal people happening all the time. And I think it's really important that that's not just like something that's transactional, that's something that's really meaningful, and it's like it's embedded in the place in the project, and also that it's not just a one-time engagement. It's got to be like, how does this actually become a good place for Aboriginal people? I think of a project like Yagan Square in Perth, and I was really sad after it opened to see security guards moving Aboriginal people away from that space at different times of the day. And it's like, no, it's like these places have to be for all people, and especially for Aboriginal people, and provide job opportunities for Aboriginal people. So yeah, the kind of engagement is really important. I think that's a long-term thing. But yeah, in the development of planning, no, I don't think these perspectives are being integrated too carefully.
Well, hopefully we improve in that area.
Yeah, totally.
Can you explain the 4 urban natures, the typology including native, cultivated, designed, horticultural and spontaneous natures, and how this framework developed by ecologists help us understand the complex, it's a big question, and fragmented mosaic of urban ecosystems in a way that the simple one urban nature approach is used in some large-scale planning?
Yeah. Well, this idea of mini natures, it's a wonderful concept. And over the years, many ecologists have written about this idea of mini natures. I think in a place like, if I use Perth as an example, because it's the one I know best, we are really lucky in Perth to have so many of this really like deep nature. It's places that we can walk through, like Kings Park or like a Banksia woodland or the wetlands down the way here, that are remnant vegetation. They're ancient vegetation. They were the same 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 800 years ago. You come across a Melaleuca and you're like, hey, that might be like an 800-year-old tree. It's like pretty astonishing. You go to Melbourne and walk around the creeks and you can't find that ancient nature. You've actually got to like go a few hours out of the city to find some remnant grasslands in Melbourne. So Perth is a wonderful city because, for a start, it has this first nature, or deep nature. So European cities, Berlin, tricky to find. Go in Germany, you might find some remnant forests outside of the big cities, but you're not going to find them in the cities because these places have been inhabited in a kind of Western way, farming, overriding, dominating in a way the nature for many, 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 many centuries. So here in a place like Perth, there's this incredible mosaic, corridors, massive patches of this ancient nature. And then you've got all the other types of nature. So you've got novel ecosystems, areas that have been, changed through human modification. And, they might be weedy or they might be overgrown. Still often important ecosystems, but obviously, there's a huge management question there in terms of how restoration can help to repair many of those spaces to a more ecologically functioning state. And then there's spontaneous nature. Yeah, there's the nature that's growing up through the pavement cracks or in people's front yards or in the verges or, in the tree canopies of the streets. So I would say in Perth, certainly in Southwest, there's, because of all this ancient nature, ecologists have always biased towards that. They've always been more interested in studying the remnants. But there's so much to study in the urban world, and particularly how the urban interacts with the remnants and how the urban can help support the health of the remnants and the deep nature. So to actually, I think we might be entering, hopefully, a space where we look at trees, tree canopy in the streets, we look at the spontaneous vegetation, we look at the novel ecosystems even, and then we look at the deep nature and see how it all works together as a whole, more so than just studying the patches.
Yeah. I know there was a few of my friends who do their PhDs, well, they've done their PhDs in, supervised by Professor Rachel Standish, in like urbanization bushlands or urbanization of, what's the word, like native nature, like bringing back, because like when you mentioned people's gardens and all that, like there's been this huge push for exotic plants in the past. And then to switch it, like we should. Do you guys take into account like we should be having native plants?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the native plants and native plantings are just fantastic, and I think the wonderful opportunity for design here in the Southwest is we have like going on 9,000 native plant species. So like what a wonderful palette of species to be using. Some of them would be very hard to grow in gardens, but we could be using a lot more of them, I think, in our urban areas.
Oh, definitely.
But then I think also I think about that, and I think of course the native is absolutely native first, of course. But then I also think about recently the Carnaby's black cockatoos and their dependence on the pine plantations and the pine trees, which are like novel ecosystems. So recently that step for the EPA to recommend preserving the Nangara pine plantations north of Perth. I mean, this is like the first time that I'm aware where the EPA has said this novel ecosystem needs protecting because of its importance to a species, like a critically endangered species like the Carnaby's. And we've got Professor Kingsley Dixon saying, if you want fast food for Carnaby's, if we want to, fill their bellies, which is what they desperately need, we can plant pecans. Or we can plant macadamia trees. So there's definitely a way to prioritize natives, but then to bring in the kind of hybrid ecosystems, the non-native ecosystems, to work for the whole. And I don't know, maybe you see it in the estuaries. Are there any fish that are non-native fish that provide an important ecosystem function, or they take the place of another one that, I don't know.
They fill a niche. But there's none that I can think of that actually provide anything for the environment. Usually it's
the opposite.
Yeah, they
disrupt a balance.
Yeah, there's a few that don't do anything, like that have just come in or that we don't know of yet.
Yeah,
they've been introduced either like human induced directly or some indirectly.
Yeah. They're controversial ideas. These ideas about novel ecosystems, I definitely appreciate that, especially knowing that, if if you come to a city like Melbourne, to not have any native nature left, to just have these modified weedy banks and some pockets of restoration around the river systems there, it is sad to have lost that kind of deep native nature. So,
Well, in terms if you're talking about estuaries and rivers, it's the native nature that filters out all
absolutely.
the nutrients or toxic nutrients and all that actually keep the water. Like we're very lucky that we can still swim
totally
in the Perth River and this one and go fishing and catch fish out of there and not have to worry about having something too toxic.
Yeah.
You know, like very, very lucky. I think I heard in Melbourne like they can't swim in Melbourne River.
They'd love to be able to, but no, they can't swim.
Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
I find that like, you know, growing up where I grew up was just like running around swimming in the rivers and dams and that was not even a thought.
Totally.
In my mind.
Totally.
Like I knew about other countries and I thought like the whole of Australia was completely fine to do that. But then, you know, I only sort of more recently learned about the Melbourne and the Orange River, or what they call the Pumpkin Soup River in Tasmania. Like crazy. Like we're doing, like I can't see how anybody's allowed to do that. So we're still very lucky. We should still be making more. But when you're talking about the urban landscapes, having native plants, it's like you talked about like the benefit for cockatoos.
Yeah.
But
totally.
it's like everything even smaller, like the native bees. One of the most listened podcasts that I've done on this was with Kit Prendergast.
Oh yeah, she's
about and about the native bees. And so even though that was 6 years ago, that podcast went out, like the amount of feedback that happened from around then. Like my mum completely changed her garden after that. My mum had, you know, she's always in the garden, loves the garden. A lot of exotic species were in the garden. Since then, the garden's completely flipped, and now she's made it this big native garden. And like we have the cockatoos coming there. Well, she has the cockatoos, you know, bathing in the bird baths, feeding in the trees, and I'm assuming all the other little bugs and native bees are quite, and like the diversity that has come back. You know, she's living in a pretty urban area, but the diversity of like plants and animals, or I wouldn't say plants are coming in, but the diversity of animals like birds, bugs, insects, lizards, frogs.
It's fantastic.
Is so like the changes, and you can have these environments thriving with nature, living in harmony with humans. If we all got onto that, imagine a whole street.
Oh, and you can see a few. You know, one person plants out their verge, and then the chances of, I think even the social scientists at UWA have worked out the ratios of people who are then inclined to plant out their verges. It just goes up and up and up until you've got like a little mini nature corridor. Walking around Whitegum Valley or some of these suburbs in Perth, you can just see fantastic, you know, all initiated by the community.
Yeah.
Amazing gardens.
It's also probably some of the easiest plants to look after because they're meant to live in our nutrient poor soils, our type of climate. So like, instead of having these exotic species that struggle to live in our environment, the native ones, they're made for it.
For sure. No, native first. But all these other natures, I just think we also need to understand them, and we also need to be aware of them. And sometimes, in the case of an incredible wetland area here, like the Yule Brook or the Greater Brixton Street wetlands I mentioned before, a whole bunch of novel ecosystems right next door. Those novel ecosystems, according to the classification, completely degraded, and the development will come in over the top. But that novel ecosystem could be absolutely essential up there on the hydrological gradient for the feeding of this wetland in terms of the water and all the other things. So to just rule out novel ecosystems, I think would be very foolish, because all nature in our cities is important. And one of the I was using some of the CSIRO Urban Monitor data recently to map the novel ecosystems, to understand spatially how much novel ecosystem do we have. And there's a hell of a lot of novel ecosystem in a city like Perth. So it also has value. Not as high as the native nature, but it has value. And very often it's in support of. If it's adjacent and it's part of a big groundwater catchment for that really important wetland, then it needs value.
What about economic value?
Yeah, economic value. Well, it's valuable as an industrial estate. So that's an economic value. But if you did like an environmental economic analysis, you could give it economic value for sure.
That's usually what drives if there's anyone gets benefit out of,
Totally.
especially political.
Yeah.
It's if there's an economic value, then they actually will probably do something to it.
Yes.
If it costs money, they don't.
Well, yeah, and this has been reasonably successful in other states as they've got big infrastructure authorities looking at, the importance of social infrastructure, health infrastructure, electricity infrastructure, water infrastructure, and they've been bringing green infrastructure into that and blue infrastructure, meaning the waterways and the nature systems of our city. And it's quite an interesting way of doing it because it turns it into something that we depend upon, just like we depend upon sewage infrastructure or electrical infrastructure for our survival. We do depend on the green infrastructure and the blue infrastructure. And so sometimes if you do economic equations through those ideas, you can get good policy change as well. Yeah.
There's hope.
Yeah, there's hope.
There's hope. So how does this territorial scale approach, which moves beyond a lot of boundaries and aims for a reciprocal corridor rather than like that hard edge between development and ecosystem services model for holistic nature-based solutions, implementation and protecting the mega diverse areas and increasing urban pressures?
Yeah. Well, the boundary thinking is very much still imposed by planning. We look at something like our metropolitan region scheme, and this is the world over. Look at our planning schemes are like all about saying you can build a house here and this is nature there. Maybe it's a thin strip or just a patch. This is a waterway. That's this, that's that. But we know that in the urban zone there's nature. We know that in, the boundaries that we try to draw around things, they're very rarely real. They're not really a reality. They're like a fiction. And the native bee doesn't stop at the boundary and turn back. No, it's like just everywhere. Like the sooner we can start to really bring this system scale understanding into the way we plan, and it's already happening. But it needs to move a lot quicker. But there's really some hope there in terms of bringing in. I like to say it's more like gradients, more like these gradients of nature, planning with these gradients of nature, bringing nature into backyards, bringing nature into the streets, bringing nature into the way we live and where we live. And then from there it bleeds out into urban corridors. From there it turns into our estuaries and our rivers and our waterways. From there it becomes our huge patches, these amazing vast patches of bushland that exist through the city. It's a question of thinking of it like a matrix,
Okay.
Yeah.
What is the best example? Is there a city that's like they've done it right? What is it like? Is it Toronto, as you mentioned earlier, or is it like?
I mean, yeah. There's definitely cities. That have made, huge shifts. Toronto is one of them, very much a nature positive city in many respects. Even Adelaide's been with a similar history to WA in terms of a lot of land clearing, bringing in Green Adelaide, bringing in a lot of really good green infrastructure policies, state level kind of planning strategies looking at increasing urban greening and improving urban nature. Sydney had an enormous green grid that they brought into their planning system. They mapped all the nature spaces of the city in order to understand opportunities for greening and to also just refer to that in the planning framework. The green grid was implemented about a decade ago, which has been really successful as well. So we've got to start talking. The planning system has to start talking about nature. At the moment, it's been very, very, very silent. There was a big pressure for a strategic assessment, which was a kind of national pressure to create a strategic assessment for Perth, but that was sort of shut down a number of years ago around COVID. And what that was seeking to do was understand the whole coastal plain, the whole of the Perth Peel region, and work out, okay, can we bring more areas into conservation? Yes, we can, at the edges of the city and all through the city. Where can be urban development? So putting a kind of boundary around Perth's urban sprawl, because it just continues to grow in all these corridors around the city. And we are going to be at 3.5 million people by 2050. So we're going from 2.3 to 3.5, like a rapidly growing city as well. So we've got to work this stuff out now.
Is it too late for mega cities to do stuff like, say, Bangkok or like these places? Like, can they?
Yeah.
Is it like once you've developed so heavily like that?
Yeah.
Can you?
I don't think so. There's cities, there's mega cities I've been to, like Mexico City. They have the most phenomenal urban tree canopy. So yeah, I mean, parts of the city don't have much urban tree canopy, but it's got the benefit of a pretty wet climate. It sits in what was a big bowl of lakes up in the mountains of Mexico, about 2,000 meters above sea level. And it's a lot of those older parts of the city are filled with huge trees, huge trees. So mega cities also can be very much in harmony with nature, but I guess some of them are. Bangkok. Doesn't sound like. I've never been to Bangkok, but it doesn't.
Don't recommend it.
No nature there.
No, it was the most depressing place I've ever been.
Yeah. I mean, I also go back to that wonderful environmental communicator, David Attenborough, the end of that documentary.
Heard of him.
Oh, right. So he's there, and he's at Chernobyl. He finishes that. His hope for the future was Chernobyl, which was a kind of depressing place to end, but also not, because the camera pans out and you just see how, left for a number of decades, Chernobyl has just rewilded itself, and there's nature growing everywhere. And when humans leave it alone, it also
comes back.
But maybe not in the wheat belt. Some parts of the wheat belt, but we've got a different, not a post-glaciation landscape like Chernobyl, perhaps, in the southwest, but still.
Wheat belt, don't we have like 1% of the natural nature in the wheat belt from what it used to be?
It's very, very low. It's very, very low.
It's like something ridiculous that we've just cleared 99. But
I was trying to end on a hopeful note. The Chernobyl, you leave Chernobyl behind and it all grows back. And it would happen in the wheat belt, but it might just take, rather than 3 decades or 4 decades, it might take a period of centuries. But nature, it has this will for creation and recreation.
That sort of goes back to my question earlier in the podcast about how far in the future do you need to think ahead? And you just mentioned it might take centuries, so we need to be thinking long term. Like everyone always wants
longer than we are now. We're not thinking long enough. It's the fallacy of our society that we do not think long term. We reward short term thinking with money so intensely. So if I go back to that house that's being constructed at the edge of the city now, the brick and tile, 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 3-bathroom perhaps, home theatre, that house won't be there in 30 years' time. It just won't, because it's built to such a standard that it can't last for 30 years. And isn't it amazing that we're living in houses in our inner suburbs and all around our city that were constructed in the 1890s or the 1910s? Like, they're going on 150 years old, some of them, and they're still really good houses. So to be thinking with this sort of legacy mindset means, you've got to kind of disincentivize the short-term profit you can make or the short-term gains you can make, and think at the time scale of a society or the time scale of an ecosystem. Like, what's the time scale of finance? Is like, and it could be a number of months. Finance, you can make gains in a number of months or a number of years, but the time scale of a society is generations.
It's to get people not to think selfishly.
Yeah.
Not think about themselves, think about the future. Very hard. I think
It's very hard. It's very hard. In some ways it goes against human nature, but I also think in all of us there's this sense of thinking generationally. And we want to be thinking about our kids or our, the people that might come after us. And I think that's the best of our work, is where we are thinking about those that come before us and those that will come after us. And ecosystems are part. It's not just the human, it's the non-human. And the ecosystems will certainly come. They've come before us and they will come after us. Absolutely certain about that. So it's like really important to be bringing this into our consciousness.
It's a good way to end.
Yeah, that's a good point. Not the wheat belt. Don't go.
No. Well, thank you so much for coming in on today.
Oh, yeah,
It was
thanks for having me.
super insightful and learnt so much. And I'm hoping everyone else will as well.
Yeah, and thanks for doing what you're doing with this podcast. It's great to have conversations that are local but reaching globally and vice versa to be listening into and tuning into.
Well, we're all connected.
We're all connected.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Kurt.
This production was recorded at the podcast studios in the Media Arts Centre at Murdoch University. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Murdoch University. Any content provided by the hosts and guests are their personal opinions and are not intended to represent the views or opinions of the university, its administration, faculty, or staff.